What if I told you that everything you've learned about winter fishing is potentially wrong? That the deepest holes in the lake, the places everyone tells you to go in January, are often barren wastelands? And what if I told you the real secret to catching big, lethargic winter bass is in water so shallow you can see the bottom? Water that's just 3 feet deep. Today, we're not just talking about a weird fluke or a one-time thing. We are exposing a powerful, predictable pattern that most anglers completely ignore. I'm going to show you why these fish move shallow when they do it, and how you can catch them. Stick around, because this might be the reason you've been blanking all winter. Now be honest, when the temperature drops, do you automatically start looking for the deepest water you can find? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear it. For generations, the wisdom has been the same. It's been passed down from father to son, from old-timer to new angler. Cold air means cold water, and cold water means fish seek the most stable environment they can find. And where is that? Deep. They tell you fish get slow, their metabolism drops, and they suspend over deep structure, waiting for spring. All of our modern technology seems to confirm this. We idle over deep channels, we see arches on our fish finders, and we convince ourselves that's where they must be. We spend hours dropping jigs and spoons into the abyss, feeling nothing but cold. We've been conditioned to believe that shallow water in winter is a dead zone, too volatile and too cold to hold life. But that belief is based on an incomplete picture of what's really happening beneath the surface. So let's start by busting the biggest myth, the deep water dogma. We believe fish go deep because it's more stable, and that's partly true. The water temperature way down at 25 or 30 feet doesn't fluctuate much. It's cold, and it stays cold. But here's the critical piece of information we're all missing. Stability doesn't equal comfort, and it certainly doesn't equal food. A fish sitting in 38-degree water at the bottom of the lake is just as cold and lethargic as a fish in 38-degree water near the bank. The idea that they're down there in a cozy winter paradise is a fantasy. They are in survival mode. But survival also means taking advantage of any opportunity to get an easy meal or to feel even a tiny bit better. That deep, stable water is often a food desert. The real opportunities, even in the dead of winter, can happen in the places we've been taught to ignore completely. Now let's talk about the single most overlooked factor in winter fishing, the sun. We feel its warmth on our faces, but we forget the incredible impact it has on the water. On a bright, sunny January day, even with cold air temperatures, solar radiation penetrates the water. Now, in deep water, that energy is dispersed and has very little effect, but in shallow water, it's a game changer. That sunlight hits the bottom, especially dark bottoms made of mud, rock, or decaying leaves. These dark surfaces act like solar panels. They absorb that heat energy and radiate it back into the immediate area. The water in that specific zone, right on the bottom in 2 or 3 feet, can become 1, 2, or even 3 degrees warmer than the surrounding water. And in a 40-degree lake, a jump to 43 degrees is like a tropical vacation for a bass. Following that warmth, we need to talk about the bait, because where the bait goes, the base will follow. It's the oldest rule in fishing, and it doesn't get suspended for the winter. Tiny baitfish like shad, shiners, and bluegill are just as susceptible to the cold as bass are. They are also seeking out those tiny pockets of warmer water to feel more comfortable. Think about it from their perspective. They have a choice between sitting in a vast 39-degree desert offshore or moving up to a shallow mudflat that has warmed to 42 degrees. It's an easy choice. On these sunny days, you'll see huge schools of baitfish move into the shallows to soak up that radiant heat. They become active, they feed on microorganisms, and for a few hours, that shallow zone becomes the liveliest place in the entire lake. It's a dinner bell, and the bass hear it loud and clear. This brings us to the predator's mindset. A winter bass isn't going to chase a lure for 50 feet. Its metabolism is in the tank. It needs to conserve every ounce of energy it can. So, how does it feed? It becomes the ultimate ambush predator. It knows that the bait is coming to these shallow, warm areas, so instead of roaming deep water looking for a meal, the smart bass will pull up into 3 feet of water, tuck itself next to a rock or a small piece of wood, and just wait. It's positioning itself in the warmest water available, right in the middle of the buffet line. It's not there to chase, it's there to intercept. The bass will sit there, almost motionless, and wait for an unsuspecting bluegill or shad to swim by. It's an incredibly efficient way to feed, burning the absolute minimum number of calories for the maximum reward. Now, it's crucial to understand that this is not an everyday pattern. You can't just go out on a cloudy, windy, 30-degree day and expect to find fish shallow. You have to pick your days carefully. The ideal conditions are stable, high-pressure systems. You're looking for those beautiful bluebird sky days after a cold front has passed. Bright, direct sunlight is the engine that drives this whole process. A little bit of wind is okay, but a strong, cold wind will quickly dissipate any surface warmth that builds up. The best days are often the ones that feel the most pleasant to be outside, typically in the middle of a 2 or 3 day warming trend. You need to become a bit of a weather nerd. Plan your trips around these high sun, stable weather windows. That's when the magic happens. So you have the right day. Where do you start? It all begins with finding the right bank. Not all shallow water is created equal. A shallow, sandy bottom flat is not going to be nearly as effective as a shallow flat with a dark, soft bottom. Remember, we're looking for surfaces that absorb and radiate heat. Mud, dark clay, and areas with lots of decaying leaves are prime real estate. Another critical factor is the angle of the bank. You want to find banks that have a northern exposure, meaning they get the most direct sunlight throughout the day. Think about the north side of a cove or a shoreline that runs east to west. These areas get bathed in sunlight from late morning to mid-afternoon, giving them the longest possible time to warm up. Ignore the shady banks. They will remain cold and lifeless all day long. Once you've found the right kind of bank, you need to look for specific pieces of cover. While the dark bottom warms the water, the base still wants something to relate to. They need an ambush point. In shallow water, wood is good, but rock is often better. A dark-colored rock or a collection of rocks can be a heat magnet. A single, isolated boulder in 3 feet of water can be the home of the biggest base in the cove. Lay-down trees are also fantastic. The wood absorbs heat, provides cover, and creates a perfect ambush spot. Even something as small as a single stump can be enough. The key is that these objects absorb more solar heat than the surrounding water, creating a microenvironment that is just slightly warmer. That's where the base will set up shop, waiting for that easy meal to swim by. Let's just circle back for a second and challenge the myth of stable deep water one more time. We think of it as a sanctuary, but is it really? Oxygen levels can sometimes be lower in deep, stagnant water during the winter. And more importantly, there's often very little food. The entire food chain, from plankton on up, is more active where there is sunlight. So while the deep water is indeed thermally stable, it can also be a biological desert. The base knows this. It knows that its chances of finding an easy meal are far greater by making a short, calculated trip to the shallows during the warmest part of the day than by sitting in the cold, dark depths hoping something swims by its face. It's a risk versus reward calculation, and on sunny days the reward is always shallow. So how do you catch these fish? Your lure selection has to match their mood, which is lazy and opportunistic. Your number one weapon should be a small finesse jig. I'm talking about something like a 1/8 or 3/16 ounce jig with a very small, compact trailer. A black and blue or green pumpkin color is perfect because it mimics a crawfish or a bluegill, and it shows up well against those dark bottoms. The key is the presentation. You are not hopping this jig, you are not swimming it, you're pitching it to a target, a rock, a stump, and letting it sink to the bottom. Then you slowly, and I mean painfully slowly, drag it a few inches at a time. You are trying to imitate something barely alive, an easy meal that the base doesn't have to work for. It's a game of patience. If the jig isn't getting bit, or if the water is extremely clear, it's time for the ultimate stealth attack, going weightless. A 5-inch Senko-style stick bait is absolutely deadly in this situation. Rig it wacky style or Texas rigged with no weight at all. The presentation is simple. You cast it out past your target and just let it sit. The slow, horizontal shimmy of a weightless stick, bait as it falls, is something a lethargic base cannot resist. It looks like a dying bait fish, the easiest possible meal. You let it fall all the way to the bottom, let it sit for 10, 20, even 30 seconds. Then you lift your rod tip very gently and let it fall again. Most of the bites will come on that initial fall, and they will feel like nothing more than a spongy weight on the end of your line. Now this might sound crazy, but let's talk about the unthinkable, a shallow crankbait. On some days, especially if you get a string of 2 or 3 warm, sunny days in a row, the base can get surprisingly active. They're not going to chase something burning through the water, but a slow, wobbling, shallow diving crankbait can trigger a reaction strike that a slower bait won't. Think about a square bill or a flat-sided crankbait that dives to about 4 feet. The key is the retrieve. You want to crawl it along the bottom, making sure it's digging into the mud and deflecting off any rocks or wood it comes into contact with. That sudden change of direction when it hits cover is what makes a base snap. It's not a hunger bite, it's a pure predatory reflex. It's a low percentage technique, but when it works, it often catches the biggest fish of the day. Your technique is more than just lure choice, it's about your angle of attack. This is where most people fail when they try fishing shallow. They pull their boat up perpendicular to the bank and make a cast directly at the shoreline. This is incredibly inefficient. Your lure is only in that critical 2 to 3 foot strike zone for a tiny fraction of the cast. The proper way to do this is to position your boat parallel to the bank. You want to be sitting out in 8 or 10 feet of water, making long casts ahead of the boat parallel to the shoreline. This allows you to keep your bait in that high percentage shallow zone for the entire retrieve. You can cover way more water and you're presenting the bait in a much more natural way, as if it's just swimming along the bank. Before you even make a cast, you have to remember that in this scenario you need to become a ghost. Sound and vibration travel incredibly well in cold, shallow water. A dropped pair of pliers, a slammed locker lid, or even the hum of your trolling motor on high can alert every fish in the area to your presence. Approach these shallow flats with your trolling motor on the lowest possible setting. Better yet, if there's a slight breeze, use it to drift into position and rely on your pole anchors to hold you. Be mindful of your shadow on the water. On these bright, sunny days, your own shadow moving over a piece of cover can be enough to spook a wary base. Stealth isn't just an option here. It is an absolute requirement for success. I've mentioned it before, but I want to hammer this point home. The 1-degree rule. It's hard for us, as warm-blooded humans, to appreciate just how much a single degree of water temperature matters to a cold-blooded creature like a bass. The difference between 39 degrees and 40 degrees might seem like nothing to us. To a base, it's the difference between being completely shut down and being willing to feed. Pay meticulous attention to the temperature gauge on your electronics. As you move into these shallow, sun-drenched flats, you should see that temperature start to tick up. If you go from the main lake at 39.5 degrees into a shallow pocket and see it rise to 40.5 or 41, you have found the strike zone. That 1 degree change is all the confirmation you need that you are in the right place. Once you're in that warmer, shallow zone, you need to dissect it. Don't just start randomly casting. The fish aren't going to be spread out evenly across the flat. They will be concentrated on the very best available cover. This is what anglers call finding the spot on the spot. You might have a 50-yard stretch of bank that looks good, but 90% of the fish will be holding on one specific laydown tree or one dark rock that's a little bigger than the others. Use your eyes. Wear good polarized sunglasses and scan the water for these subtle differences. Make multiple precise casts to each piece of cover from different angles before moving on. Your job isn't just to find the warm water, it's to find the single best piece of real estate within that warm water. It's also critical to understand that this is not an all-day pattern. The bite window can be incredibly short and specific. Don't expect to show up at sunrise and start catching them. In the early morning, that shallow water is at its coldest point from the long, cold night. The pattern usually doesn't kick in until the sun has been high in the sky for a few hours, giving it time to warm up those shallow flats. The absolute prime time is typically from around 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. when the sun is at its highest and most direct angle. You might fish for 4 hours and only get bites within a single 45-minute window when the conditions are perfect. You have to be patient and be on the water during that peak solar window to capitalize on it. Finally, you have to relearn what a bite feels like. A winter bass in shallow water isn't going to slam your lure and rip the rod out of your hand. Most of the time, the bite is incredibly subtle. It's often described as a mushy feeling or just a sense of pressure, as if you've dragged your lure into a wet sponge. That wasn't a leaf, that was a fish. They often just swim up to the bait and inhale it gently without moving very far. You have to be a line watcher. Any slight tick, jump, or sideways movement in your line is a signal to set the hook. Using a sensitive rod and high-visibility braided line with a fluorocarbon leader will help you detect these incredibly light bites. If you're waiting for that classic thump, you will miss almost every fish. This is one of the few times in modern fishing where I will tell you to look up from your fish finder. Your electronics are an amazing tool for dissecting deep water, but they can betray you in this situation. You'll idle over these shallow flats and see absolutely nothing on your screen, and you'll conclude there are no fish there. But the fish are tucked so tight to cover, or the cone angle of your transducer is so narrow in shallow water that you simply won't mark them. This is old-school visual fishing. You are using your eyes to find promising-looking banks, to spot submerged cover, and to watch your line for the bite. Trust your instincts and what the conditions are telling you. The fish are there, even if your $10,000 electronics say they aren't. This is about trusting the pattern, not the screen. Let me paint a quick picture for you. Last January, it was a brutal week, air temps in the 20s. I spent 2 days dragging jigs in 30 feet of water without a single bite. The third day, the sun came out. It was beautiful, but still cold. I almost didn't go, but I remembered this pattern. I went to a north-facing cove with a dark mud bottom. The main lake was 38 degrees. I got into the back of this cove, into 2 feet of water, and my graph read 41 degrees. I made a long cast with a weightless stickbait parallel to a fallen tree. I let it sink, and as I watched my line, it just slowly started swimming to the left. I reeled down, swung, and a 4-pounder came thrashing to the surface. I spent the next 2 hours in that one small area and caught 5 more big ones. They were all there, soaking up that sun, in water I would have driven right past just a year ago. The final and most difficult step is rewiring your angler's brain. Everything about this pattern feels wrong. It goes against decades of conventional wisdom. Your instincts will be screaming at you to go deep. Your fishing buddies will probably call you crazy. But you have to fight that urge. You have to trust the science of solar heating and the fundamental behavior of predator and prey. The first few times you try this, you might not have success, and the urge to retreat to the safety of deep water will be strong. But stick with it. Wait for the perfect conditions. Be meticulous in your approach. When you finally connect with that first big, shallow winter base, it will be a light bulb moment. It will fundamentally change the way you look at a frozen lake, and it will open up a world of possibilities that you never knew existed. So, let's bring it all together. For years we've been told the same story. Winter means deep. We've spent countless frozen hours staring at screens, hoping for a sign of life in the abyss. The biggest takeaway, the real aha moment, is that the fish are simply following the 2 things they need most: warmth and food. And on those bright, sunny winter days, the most comfortable water and the most active bait fish are not in 40 feet of water, they're in 3 feet. This changes everything. It means that huge sections of the lake that we completely ignore for 4 months out of the year are actually prime feeding grounds. It means you don't need a boat loaded with electronics to succeed. You need a good pair of sunglasses and a patient approach. It's a simple, powerful secret that's hiding in plain sight. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to challenge the old way of doing things. If this video gave you a new perspective on winter fishing, do me a favor and hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next tip. Now I want to hear from you. What is the most unconventional spot you've ever caught a winter bass? Tell me your story in the comments below.